Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, depending on when you are listening to this. Welcome back to the, fourth edition now, already on to our fourth edition of the Opening Tee podcast, where I give you a quick little recap of last week of the happenings in the professional golf world that we can at least bet on and or play some daily fantasy sports on, and also give you a quick little preview of the upcoming week, what we can expect to see. I give you my top 5 prices of the week, what I think they're going to come in at, a little bit into the field, and a little bit of statistical preview before heading back onto the mic tomorrow night for the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast, which the last couple of weeks I've been joined by Matt Jones on Twitter, at Matt Jones TFR. Who will likely be joining me again this week. So without further ado, let's go right into the recap from last week in our segment called The Foursome of Facts. So Lanto Griffin caps off an impressive fall swing, didn't miss one cut, had all of his finishes in the top 25, and finished it off with a win. Here's the thing, though. He was also chalk, and really big chalk in the higher dollars. For example, the $100 Stinger. He was 40% owned in the $555, north of 30%. So what does that mean? Well, if you're in my shoes and faded him, you likely didn't cash in any of them, no matter if you even got 6 of 6, just because he won and obviously just had a tremendous amount of points comparatively to everybody else. So I think he scored north of 144 points. Tough to come back from that. A lot of the cash lines, were right around that $400 number, which we'll get into in a little bit. So next one is 4 golfers from the Korn Ferry Tour in the top 10 this week. No surprise. Lanto Griffin getting the win. Scott Harrington, Mark Hubbard, Xingzun Jiang, all top 5s, all Korn Ferry Tour grads this year. So certainly paying off if you had dug in and done the research and found these guys. Obviously provided big dividends for themselves and possibly for you as well. Speaking of paying dividends, Bernd Wiesberger for the 3rd time this year is paying dividends, winning out on the European Tour, his 2nd Rolex Series event, winning the Italian Open. He was behind Fitzpatrick going into the 9th hole, and Fitzpatrick then sniped one out of bounds. And once Bernd Wiesberger learned about that, he did not turn back, making almost every putt, winning again, and Fitzpatrick coming in 2nd yet again. So very interesting there. Matt Wallace, another miserable Sunday. He was in there too, right at 12 under, and he sniped one out of bounds on the 10th hole, I believe it was, or 11. So just interesting to note there. I'd like to bring in Euro now, since we're going to see a lot of crossover, especially with this week in the field. A lot of Euros are back, so I'm going to add in some Euro events if there's a big one over there or something of notice. And the last one, the 6 of 6 percentage was abysmal yet again. Below 5% in most places. Really tough right now to get all 6 of 6 through, but luckily it'll be changing this week. I'm almost going to assure you, unless you have a withdraw this week, that you're going to get 6 of 6 through. It is a no-cut event. We didn't have anybody withdraw last year, so hopefully, all the golfers making the trip over to Asia likely won't withdraw. Actually, we had one withdraw during this. The Asian swing is what they're calling it, I guess. Somebody missed his tee time. A local, I shouldn't say local player, an Asian tour golfer had missed his tee time, so he didn't accumulate any points for the rest of the tournament. Anyways, so getting back to the 6 of 6, it was below 5%, and on the Euro Tour, it was actually closer to 10 or 15%. So interesting there. That rarely ever happens. All right, so let's head into the not your average missed cut segment. And last week, let me tell you, it did really good, and we're starting to see a little bit of a theme here. And Kramer Hickok tied for 23. Ryan Armour tied for 23rd. Bud Cauley tied for 9th. Nick Watney tied for 28th. And the only golfer that played, besides Brendan Hagee, who withdrew, who played this week that missed the cut the previous week due to his putting was Andrew Landry, and he missed it due to his putting again. So kind of falling into that Grillo trap of just a really cold putter and not doing himself any favors on the green. So this week, which again, it's not going to be as important or as prevalent as it has last week, because I don't know if any of these guys got into the field this week. so not too much to worry about. David Hearn, Kevin Chappell, Jason Duffner, Tom Hoagie, Richie Wierenski, Logan McCracken, Scott Brown, Tyler Duncan. Oh, we're going to talk about him. He's going to be the not your average miscut story here. And then Josh Teeter. So Tyler Duncan comes to 18. Needs to make double to make the cut. Puts his drive just short of the right bunker in the rough. Snipes his next shot into the water. So he's dropping 3, hitting 4. Puts it on the green. He's got a 40-footer now. Blows his 40-footer 5 feet by and misses the 5-footer to triple to miss the cut. He was also the last guy to play the 18th hole as well, which was just an absolute monstrosity all week. Very, very tough hole, especially the first 2 days when the wind was blowing. So flip side of that, which again, not going to be that prevalent. None of the guys are in the field this week. These guys putted well, missed the cut though due to everything else. David Lingmerth, Peter Uline, Matt Smith, D.A. Points, and Michael Pareas. So to finish up last week, let's just go over a couple of the DFS contests. And this is one of those rare weeks where you see the smaller contests be harder to cash in because of Lanto Griffin's ownership in them. So for example, in the small $8, which only had $1,000 to first place, 403 was the cash line. The $8 and the big one, in the $8 and the big one, excuse me there, sorry about that little break there. I saw something wrong with my mic. Hopefully you guys might have heard it as well. The big $8 was 410. So again, very different from what we've seen. As we go up, the 555 was 427. The $100 was 434. Club Tour 419. And the $33 single entry dog leg 428. So like I said again, just a really tough week. If you didn't play Lanto Griffin, you had a tough time cashing. So that covers last week. We're at about 7 minutes, so not too bad. That's what I like to do. I like to try and keep it under 10 minutes. You know, nothing else too much of note other than a couple of guys like Ryan Armour who played really well. I'm not diving as much into the golfers that played well and may not have putted well because, again, none of them are in the field this week. I don't know if anyone that was playing last week is in the field this week. So just something to keep note of. All right, we turn our attention to now the Asian swing, where the contests are wacky, their lock time is wacky. So it's going to be overnight on Wednesday. So it's going to start Wednesday. It's going to finish in the middle of the night on Sunday morning. So, you know, if you want to get your golf sweat out of the way and just focus on football or focus on family or football and family, you'll be able to do that. Like I said, again, they play overnight with it finishing somewhere around the probably 6 o'clock in the morning range over here. Like I said, lock time will likely be 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock at night on Wednesday here, which puts it about 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday for a 74-man field. I believe they just go straight off from threes. I don't think that they go in waves. I believe it's just threes all the way out, and then they do the reverse order for Friday. Verify that on tomorrow's pod once we get the tee times. But still, keep note of the lock time. Should be somewhere at nighttime on Wednesday. So Ben and I's Live Before Lock show will really be Live Before Lock this week. The first tournament of the Asian Swing is the CJ Cup at Nine Bridges, a beautiful, majestic golf course set in Jeju Island in South Korea. It's commonly referred to, pretty much every website you go to says that it's commonly referred to as the Maui of South Korea. Very similar climate, very similar topography. You'll notice the Mount Halaja, I think, is in the background. Again, the pronunciations are obviously not my strong suit. However, going into the course, it's a beautiful manicured course that winds through the tropical climate of Jeju. It does have some tall trees that are on the outskirts of the fairway. I can't expect, too many golfers besides Jordan Spieth to be hitting in them this week. Picking your lines will be important, so it's not all about accuracy this week, but picking your lines and putting the ball and missing in the correct area will be important. We saw Brooks last year only hit about 73% of his fairways, which obviously we know is very unlike him. when he wins, that actually finished him 42nd in the week, for the week. So hitting the fairway, maybe not so paramount. You know, you can certainly miss a couple of tee shots and get away with it here, as Brooks showed you. We'll get into a couple of more Brooks' stat in a little bit. It's a par 72, 7,200 yards, played at a little bit of elevation. But some of the par 4s do have a forced layup on their drive, which, again, we'll get into in just a little bit. So the field, here's what it's comprised of. Looks like it's, at least this is what it says, 5 players from the Korean PGA Tour, 2 players from the Asian Tour, 3 Koreans from the official World Golf Ranking, sponsors exemptions, and then after that, the top 60 available on the prior season's FedEx Cup point list to fill out this 78-man field. So, like I said, you get 5, 2, 3, and then the sponsors exemptions. We'll get into all those tomorrow. So, roughly about the top 40 available. It says top 60, but I don't think it ends up being... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it ends up being top 60 regardless. They have 18 other through the 3, 2, 5, and sponsors exemptions. So, who's playing in the field? 21 of the world's top 50 are here to compete this week. So, quite a good field, which is going to be a stark contrast from the previous week at the Houston Open, which was just a terrible field. It is a no-cut event with only 74 golfers. 21 of the top 50, like I said, are here to compete. So of the 74, 21 are ranked inside the top 50, and then another bunch in the top 100. Really strong field. We'll go into my prices first. I'm going to add the section I'm going to add, or segment I'm going to add this week is going to be a little bit of a no-cut strategy. It does change a bit, at least on my end. It changes a bit. It allows me to take a bit more risks with your lineup because you know you're guaranteed 4 rounds from all of your golfers as long as said golfer shows up for his tee time, which, like I said, did not happen last year in one of these Asian Swing tournaments. So let's jump into the prices. Brooks Koepka is the defending champion here. I think he comes in at 11.8K, pretty close to 12 in a no-cut event. And I think they throw JT, who's the second official World Golf Ranker, in the field, number 6, behind Brooks, number 1. I'm going to guess that they put JT right up at 11.6. Not much decrease from Brooks. They're going to try... My guess is try and separate those two guys from the field. Then they're gonna. This is where they could either go Gary Woodland, based on the course history, coming in second last year. Didn't have a great start though 2 weeks ago to get his. Made the cut, but nothing really that good. I think they either go him or Fleetwood at 10.7K with my Hideki Matsuyama sandwich in between at 10.4K. So either Fleetwood or Woodland at 10.1 and the other at 10.7 with Matsuyama sandwich in between. A couple of other good golfers, of course, in the field with 21 of the top 50. But, again, this is a top 5. I'll give you my Jordan Spieth price of the week just because why not? We all know that if you don't know, then you now know. I enjoy watching him play. Unlike most other people in the industry or what have you, it's not easy to bet on Jordan Spieth because his style of game is very different than what normal people would consider consistent, of course. Jordan Spieth just gets it done with his short game versus other people that get it done with their ball striking, and people believe that ball striking is much more predictable than the short game. While that may be true, Jordan seems to have been an exception to the rule in years past, but obviously not in the last 2 years. However, this week, 9.3K, and hopefully if he comes in at that, we should get under 10% ownership, which is the real reason why I love to try and get people to hate him so much, is I'm always pretty much guaranteed a low ownership. That's always nice. Okay, so I've given you my prices. Brooks 11.8, JT 11.6, Fleetwood or Woodland 10.7, Hideki 10.4, Fleetwood, Woodland 10.1. Let's move on to Brooks' stats from last year. And the Asian Swing, we don't get strokes gain data. The technology does not make the long trip over to Korea and Japan, so we just have to go off of base stats. And what I mean by base, normal old school stats is greens in regulation, fairways hit, in putts, putting average and putts per round, which again, not great. But Brooks' stats, he only hit about 78% of his greens, tying for 23rd. Fairways hit, he was tied for 42nd. Putting, he was tied for 5th. But where he separated himself was birdie or better percentage. Him and Gary Woodland just absolutely obliterated the field there. They were 1 and 2. Gary was actually 1 in birdie or better percentage, but had a double bogey as compared to Brooks's no double bogeys. Also, Brooks threw in 2 eagles, where Woodland just had the 27 birdies. Brooks had 23 birdies. But obviously, when you throw in the eagles, those pretty much match out each other. And then Gary had 1 more bogey than Woodland did. So, I'm sorry, than Brooks did. I just said Gary than Woodland did. My apologies. So, what does that really mean? Well, that means that Brooks missed in the right spots. He took advantage of his driver in his driving distance in certain situations and didn't mind if he ended up in the rough. Obviously, the rough, that they're not going to be, they like scoring here. I mean, the winning score last year, well, when you see Gary Woodland have 27 birdies, you know he's not making too many bogeys at least. So, I expect the course played to about a stroke under par for the average last year, which put it right at about 31 out of 50. So, middle of the pack, closer to maybe a little bit even in terms of toughness, but 21 under par, which that's not significantly low when you really think about it, especially for a course that's only 7,200 yards at a par 72. You would expect maybe scores to get a little better. So there are bogeys out there. In a couple of courses, a couple of holes, a lot of water around some of these holes, which I'm sure will be tilting, especially the fact that we don't have shot tracker. If we don't have strokes gained, we don't have shot tracker, so you really don't know where your golfer is. It's a quite tilting if you try and follow along. You're going to see a lot of shot 4 in the hole, or shot 3 from the rough, and also when the ball goes in the water, with no shot tracker, the updates that they do give tend to break down a little bit. So if your golfer hasn't had an update in quite a while on the PGA Tour app, it's likely their ball is in a hazard somewhere. Just a quick note there. So proximity stats, I went through and went through each hole, and then went through each hole's description on the course's website, and they do a really nice job of it, and you get to see a flyover of every hole too, so really nice. I came up to under 100 yards, going to get about 7 opportunities, roughly, depending on if you go for the par 5s into, or if you miss the green on the par 5s. Have upwards of 7 chances to hit a wedge. 125 to 150, only 3. 150 to 175, only 1. The 175 to 200 number was the hot button for me. 6 approaches from there per day, especially all of the par 3s. 3 of the 4 par 3s are between 175 and 200. So obviously that one is going to dominate the boards a little bit. So we'll obviously take a look at the proximity stats tomorrow night to see who we might be able to hone in on as well. So the other 2 that I took a look at, birdie or better percentage, like I mentioned, we'll take a look at that tomorrow. Also birdie or better percentages from the par 4s, or even birdie or better percentage from that 175 to 200. Maybe we'll take a look at that and see if our statistical guy, Matt Jones, can come up with a good stat there. Strokes gained putting, like I mentioned, it seemed Brooks had a really good putting week last week that propelled him upwards. So now we'll go into the last segment of this show here. And this week it's going to be just a couple of minutes on no-cut strategy. So, of course, in a normal week, goal first and foremost is to try and get 6 of 6 golfers to play all 4 rounds. Obviously, in a no-cut event, we don't have to worry about that as long as our golfer doesn't withdraw, which, of course, there have been tons of horror stories. Probably the worst horror story out there was Daniel Berger back a couple of years ago at the WGC Bridgestone. Hit one shot, withdrew after hitting that shot so he could get a last place paycheck for $60,000, and there was so much backlash about that he ended up donating all of the money. Good on him, because it's just kind of frowned upon there. Interesting enough. There's been a couple of other ones as well, but not as prolific as that one. So, in a no-cut event, the nice thing is that if you target golfers that have a good birdie or better percentage and are good from the certain proximities that you highlight, normally you're not going to get too hurt if they don't end up coming in the top 15 or 20, as long as their birdie or better percentage for the week is that of somebody in the top 5. And what I mean by that is, if you look at, so there's only 74 golfers in this field. In most no-cut events, it's very similar. Positional points from 10th to, say, 35th, which is the middle of the field. 35th, you're getting 3, and 10th, you're getting somewhere close to 8 points. Well, if that guy that came in 35th makes 3 more birdies, but 4 more bogeys or 5 more bogeys than said golfer that's in the top 10, their point differential is going to be very small. So you can make up, if your guy comes in the 30th or 40th, you can make up those positional points by more birdies. Of course, by eagles as well. So that's where you can look into distance, because some of the par 5s here, and this is where it's getting course specific, some of these par 5s are on the longer side. So if you've got, say a guy that has an opportunity to get to every single one of these par 5s and 2, which not everybody in the field can, you're definitely giving yourself a leg up. So this is where I like to use guys, for example, like Keith Mitchell. I remember using him here last year because of his birdie or better percentage, because I knew he could get to all 4 par 5s, and he actually really paid off. He ended up coming in with 22 birdies, which put him in the top 5 on the birdie or better percentage. And it didn't end up mattering that much where he finished in the tournament, because he had all those birdies. And of course, with Keith Mitchell, that Keith Mitchell is going to make plenty of bogeys and maybe a couple of double bogeys. But still, a good start. So he actually finished in a tie for 14th. So probably a little bit better in the finish position than we had thought. But still, a good showing for him. The scores will range quite a bit here. Last place last year came in plus 13. Winning was minus 21. So 34 differential there is quite a bit. But that's obviously because some of the players that are playing in the field from the Korean and Asian tours, golf tours around that area, probably are not quite up to the level of competition that some of these PGA Tour guys are playing at. So, more strategy. That means focus on the PGA Tour golfers that have been in relatively good form over the last 6 months. So take out Michael Kim and look at driving distance down there because of the course fit. Again, this is going to change in some of these no-cut events. For example, the WGC Mexico, you don't need driving distance there because they play at such elevation, and they do play at some elevation here too, but the course plays at like 6,400 yards when you factor it in. It's one of the highest elevations that they play all year. So not too much. So this week, my strategy will be to try and mix in my top guys that I want to mix in with some of these lower price guys that have an edge in driving distance and will look for that birdie or better percentage to take me through this week and push me through the cash line. So hopefully that gave you guys and gals, if they're out there listening, a good little preview of the CJ Cup. Again, it's a beautiful golf course. It's called the CJ Cup at Nine Bridges. The course is called Nine Bridges. And I'll end on this. Because there's 8 bridges that you walk on the course and that you cross while playing the course, and the 9th one is the metaphorical one that you once you finish the 18 holes, you've crossed all your 9th bridge. Just a way, I guess, to come up with a creative name for a golf course, and it is kind of creative. So enjoy the week. The views are fantastic. The coverage is a little weird. It's a little different. It's not as clean. Obviously, it's coming from halfway around the world, and of course, we don't have shot tracker and the alike, so tilting on that front. But thanks for joining me, everybody, for this little 25-minute preview of the CJ Cup at Nine Bridges, and we'll see you back tomorrow for Shot 3 from the tee.